to. With the current uprise of Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer, I needed some way to integrate the both of them, but make a video different than what other people have been doing. So how about we compare the two beings who are known as being second only to the big heads of their respective groups, that being Yuta Akatsuki and Kokushibo. Both are somewhat outliers in their own verse when it comes to the way of the blade, being that demons rarely use blades, and most Jujutsu sorcerers rather rely on their techniques than traditional Kenjutsu. Anyway, let's get to the main meat of this video. In the modern era of Jujutsu, the title of special grade is only attributed to 4 sorcerers: Suguru Geto, Yuki Tsukuyomo, Gojo Satoru, and Yuta Akatsuki. Brandishing the name of special grade grants Yuta some of the very high and applicable scaling in relation to the rest of his verse, as due to how their power system works. A special grade sorcerer should be able to deal with anything under the sun with very few exemptions. Something he would be beyond is the carpet bombing level that is attributed to even special grade curses they get as a basis. Now in terms of TNT output, it gets around the several to dozen ton range. This being consistent as other special grade curses or combatants can produce similar if not beyond the minimum requirements of a special grade. However, when getting to the more stronger curses, they have feats that can get them in a couple hundred range, that being with Hanami and the growth of her tree creations, and Mahito and his shaking of parts of Shibuya. Both feats get into what some would call the multi-city block destructive power range. This being important for Yuta as he quite literally bodies an even stronger Yuji than his Shibuya self, whom which can contest with that said level of power while only be at 1/10 of his soul. And to briefly explain why the level of your soul relates to your physicality, in Jujutsu Kaisen the body and the soul are one and the same, while more predominantly when the soul is significantly affected in any way, the body will follow suit. Meaning if Yuji's bowl is weakened, so is his body. By proxy, Yuta is beyond 10 times said multi-city block values I gave, around the few kiloton range, or energy equivalent to flatten some more real towns. This is backed up as in even lore, one of the weakest versions of Rika, which is just an aspect of Yuta's curse technique, is stated to be able to destroy towns as well. This town range for pre-Shingaku Showdown Yuta is quite consistent, as even Ryu can vaporize a massive area which gets around a 7 kiloton of force, which Yuta can fight evenly if not debatably strong while decently holding back. However, he can even be brought up to even higher levels, as by Yuji's own admission, he believes just from seeing Yuta barely in action, he thinks he can tank on a Sukuna, who at this moment is only 15 fingers, which Sukuna at this time has feats that would grant him into that megaton range. Something such as Gojo with his Maxometer, which has been estimated to produce between 3 to 10 megatons of TNT, and while yes, he doesn't scale to it, but Sukuna on the other hand is just stated if it hit him, it would have only done some damage. This level of power is consistent even by Sukuna's own showings, as with his divine flame, he's able to destroy a massive portion of Shibuya, which for a long time we've only gotten to the town or kiloton range. However, due to the new acquired information that the explosion encompasses the entirety of his domain radius, which at the time was 140 meters, said feat gets calculated producing 56 megatons of range, which is enough energy to not only vaporize cities, but even surpass the strongest of our real-life nuclear warheads. And just to put a tad bit more of consistency on this for Yuta, back to the whole Rika destroying a town, due to the average size of a town within Japan, the feat is estimated upwards of 60 megatons of TNT, which is almost equal to even Sukuna's own feats. However, we think this was going to be an overtime thing, even though we do know Rika has the capability to actually make explosion-based attacks. But for the sake of lowballing, say she took minutes to do so, and it's only like 1/5 of this output, then she and Yuta by proxy would be 12 megatons of force, which is still consistent with the rest of the higher pre-Shingaku Showdown showings. Now entering the Shingaku Showdown, we do know that Yuta did in fact get stronger, we just don't know by how much, as all his feats against Sukuna work against him while heavily weakened and holding back. And we see just how strong a post-Curse Bath Sukuna was. However, the one thing that Yuta does have going for him is cutting off Kenjaku's head. Now yes, this was him while off guarded and maybe a bit weakened, however nonetheless he still is shown to scale to him. This being impressive as Kenjaku in the arc prior is able to resist the pull of Yuki's mini black hole. Said energy Kenjaku would have needed to produce has been found at least 430 megatons of TNT, which would just mean that both Kenny and Yuta are capable of tanking and dishing out enough energy to completely pulverize mountains many times over. The Jujutsu Kaisen fanbase has taken its blows throughout the years, mostly due to Cursed Neowa and his imposed cap on the verse in terms of speed, that being a staggering Mach 3. However, where most fail, special grades are the exceptions. I think Gege was trying to depict this quiet parent, as Yuta literally runs over 500 kilometers to get to Shigaku. Now we don't have a definite time frame, but we do know it's extremely short, as the fight between Takaba and Kenny took place right after Gojo's death, and then Yuta had to end up clean up all the curses remaining from Kenjaku. During this time, Sukuna was having his fight with Higuruma, so I think the realistic lowest time frames between the two were at the highest 5 minutes, which does translate to around Mach 13 or hypersonic. This hypersonic range is quite consistent for special grades, as it's only further solidified as even Kenjaku can casually dodge the confirmed supersonic speeds of Piercing Bloods many times, which at the lowest end gets into that Mach 7 to 36 range, to when he actually dodges at almost a centimeter off from his head, it gets beyond speeds of Mach 140. And if this doesn't drive the point home, Hoji, someone whose Machi's equal, can perceive and dodge lightning at relative speeds to when accounting for the anime. This speed's even further supported for him due to being able to dodge and backstep a considerable distance from Megumi even after his blade already pierced his shirt, which gets to almost identical speed of Mach 231. Essentially, this several hundred Mach range of speed is quite consistent for the special grades. The only realistic highest end you can give him is by scaling Yuta relative to Hikari, who can similarly react and intercept lightning bolts at point blank range. If you take this as true, assuming this isn't some weird panel shot or placement, this can be a bit of an upscale, going from the lowest of Mach 945 to the highest of Mach 4760, which is quite of an impressive difference. My personal opinion, however, I think the lower 100 scale is more consistent, while the higher 1000 range is being an absolute high, if not a complete outlier. However, I digress. Long ago, during the Sengoku era of Japan, there lived a legendary swordsman, Michikatsu Sugiyakuni, one of the first breath users, and even developed the long-forgotten breathing style, the Breath of the Moon, made as a parallel to his younger brother and his Breath of the Sun. However, when encountering the devil, he sold his soul and forfeited his humanity, and became known as Kokushibo, Upper Moon 1 of the 12 Kizuki. He, as the Upper Moon 1, cannot be compared to the other moons below him. He's on a scale completely transcendent in comparison. In our introduction to him, he's able to make a full one of the strongest Hashras at the time, to the point where he needed to use the mark, which had no effect on him and was essentially being blitzed and one-shotted. This being massively impressive, as I've gone over in other videos, even the weakest Upper Moons and Hashra can either tank or destroy the destruction of the entertainment district, which was done in such a way said feat is warned to generate upwards of 151 kilotons of TNT. This, for example, is over 10 times the force that the Little Boy Bomb had, and Hashra, who are on the lowest end of scale, are able to contend with this force while dying. This already establishes a pretty crazy scaling line for Koku, as the weakest Upper Moon is a basis of this feat, and then we have Hontangu, who even at his weakest is on the level of Upper Moon, so assuming as strong as Gyataro, then each of his clones are stated to be stronger than him, and so Hakuton is just a fusion or addition of them all four, making a minimum of the Upper Moon 4 being 4 times stronger than lower 6, and this is assuming each clone were equal to the old Hontangu, which as established isn't the case. Then we have other Hashira such as being Mitsuri on similar levels to Miruchiro prior to the Hashira training arc, who were able to contend with said demon in their base, and then get a factor of 10 times on top of that with their Slayer mark, as mentioned in the Demon Slayer fanbook. So let's do the math together. We have the weakest moons or Hashira as their bases at 151 kilotons, then we have Zohakuton being 4 times that, and then we have the more relevant Hashira with their Slayer marks at 10 times that value, which gives us a grand total output of a bit over 6 megatons of TNT, and even after a whole training arc, Koku can absolutely demolish said level of Hashira while significantly holding back due to him being part of his lineage. Now usually I would just stop here, so I try to avoid calc stacking, as eventually it gets to the point where you just end up taking so many assumptions and it gets so convoluted and starts to detract from the narrative of what the author was putting out. However, in Koku's case, we actually have ways to get him higher. There are 2 main ways, so I'll just put them out there and you can choose which one you agree with more. With the first one is relating to the difference found between Upper Moon 4 and 6, which as we established being a 4 times difference. Now if we assume the difference between 6 and 5 is just half as much as 6 and 4, then the higher rank could be 2 times the last. This is assuming that each rank is just as much stronger as the last, which honestly you can argue it's more, but I digress. If that's the case, we have Akaza at least in the 6 megaton range based on how he had Giyu with his mark, then Doma is 2 times that and Koku's 2 times times him, or a grand total of 24 megatons of TNT, which is more energy than most modern day nuclear warheads, which can wipe cities off the face of the earth. With the second way of his upscale coming from fighting Guillaume, as when he appeared in chapter 168, it stated in the little author's note that at the time he was the strongest man in the Demon Slayer court. This would even include the likes of Mark Giyu and Tanjiro, which takes place in chapter 152, meaning just a base Gyome would be on the level of the other Hashiras in their mark states, or 6-ish megatons, and then when he uses his mark he would be another 10 times stronger, or be capable of generating 60 megatons of TNT, which is more than the strongest bomb ever tested in history. And Kokushibo, while still in his casual state and being nerfed due to Sanemi's blood, is able to keep up with him, and it takes a combined assault of both the Stone, Wind, and Mist Hashira just to make him try. With this last part applying to both interpretations, when he enters his longsword state, it's stated that his attack range is increased by more than double. Now if you think this correlates to his stats, or he's physically throwing his swings harder so his strength is the one gaining increase, this can be arguably a 2 times increase when he actually is trying, or can get between 48 to 120 megatons, which at the absolute highest would give Koku energy equivalent to annihilating mountains and then some. But with the absolute highest end for Kokushibo revolves around how he would even be above the lights of Zenitsu due to the aforementioned inverse, which in his 7th form he is stated according to the fanbook to be as fast as a flash of light, which would just be light speed, and as I've already explained that in the previous video, but I'll do it again here, this should be not taken as hyperbolic, as the statement isn't saying he is as fast like a flash of light, which in the case it would be ambiguous or hyperbolic. It's just making a statement that he is in fact that fast, which would be consistent as with other Hashiras at this level, such as a unmarked Mitsuri can react and dodge multiple Zohakuton's arrow attacks, which according to the novelization are stated to be attacks of light, showing a consistency that now that there are a level where relativistic or even light speed movement is consistent, this is not even including the higher tiers. With this being the case, using Zenitsu and plugging in said values, just the kinetic energy you would be generating alone would be worth 7.5 gigatons of TNT, and a base Kokushibo should unironically upscale this, or you can argue that Kokushibo is an island buster in terms of strength. By the end of the day, I would say Koku's at least in that megaton or city level range, if you want to give him his bare minimum, with everything else just being his more middle or higher ends. And to quickly go in more depth in the speed department, as we've already established, a consistent relativistic to light speed meta, with Mitsuri and Zenitsu being the pillars of these metas, which yes, I'm aware of the lightning timing or massively hypersonic range of feats in the verse, but that scales to either the more irrelevant characters or more of a staple of speed in prior arcs. As we've already gone over, at least within the tailed end of Demon Slayer, relativistic to light speed is consistent. But doing some math, even if we assume an unmarked Mitsuri is only 10% the speed of light due to her feat of casually dodging the said light attack, and then with the mark she is 10 times greater than her base. Mind you, the Slayer mark is stated to amp all their combative stats, which in the process would make her the speed of light. And then we use the previous established scaling line for a base going, which would be at that level minimum. Then he gets 10 times faster or 10 times speed of light. And you need to remember that these people need to use the transparent world on top of their marks just to be able to perceive Kokushibo. Now the transparent world does massively increase their speed, as it allows someone to typically perception with someone who is already faster than them originally, and is able to allow you to perceive others' movements as slow. Now slow and or the transparent world amp is very ambiguous. However, if we take the example of Akaza and Giyu, and when they were fighting at their maximum speed, which is the case with Giyu, as he is quite literally fighting for his life. However, not so much for Akaza, but he was fighting him at relative speeds, which doesn't really matter. And then with the transparent world, Tanjiro sees them as slow. If we use the maximum sprinting speed of a human, which is around 20 miles per hour, and a slow speed or walking speed, which is generally around 2.5 to almost 4 miles, so let's just say 4. With that being the case, the transparent world can increase one speed around 5 times, which can be consistent as it's portrayed to be beyond perception level blitz difference in speed, meaning Kokushibo is already 5 times already faster than light Gyome, and he can stack his own transparent world to get another 5 times faster, or you can come up with a Kokushibo being 250 times the speed of light, which is pretty deep in those faster than light ranges. Actually, Crafty, that's calc stacking and that isn't allowed. Okay, fine, look at it like this. Kokushibo sees people who move at the speed of light as slow. So slow he can perception blitz them, then can stack several speed amplifiers on top of that, showing that Kokushibo is multiple layers, if not above and beyond the speed of light. So after in-depthly going over their stats, we have a very unique result. Okay, in terms of speed, I'm gonna keep it real short. Even when lowballing Kokushibo and highballing Yuta, Kokushibo is easily hundreds to thousands of times faster than him. He'll realistically never be able to land a single hit on him. While in the strength department, if we use the more realistic or considerate ends, Yuta is on the stronger side, just not to a crazy amount in comparison to speed. Honestly, even in this case, I just don't see any way Yuta can even hit Kokushibo. Even if he gets his domain off and catches him inside, he still has to actually physically grab onto the katana to actually have his guaranteed hit, which by that time, Koku could essentially attack him a few dozen to hundreds of times. Also, another thing to consider is Kokushibo's survivability. He has limitless stamina and regeneration, and Yuta has no way to mimic the sun, so it couldn't even kill him in the first place. Now, this is not me saying if you don't have the star-related energy properties, you can't kill demons. However, it's not like Yuta has any way to atomize them either. Basically, we have an immortal fighter who is thousands of times faster and at best a dozen times weaker than Yuta. And bringing skill into this just gets worse. While yes, Yuta may be a competent sword user, Kokushibo is a 400-year veteran who hails from the golden era of swordsmanship. Overall, I see Kokushibo just relentlessly attacking Yuta and eventually killing him. And if you use Kokushibo's higher end, he'll just cleave right through Yuta. Anyway, that's all y'all. Catch you on the next one. And Mr. Crafty, out.